It's time to learn how to drop columns from a data frame. Just like any other operation in Pandas, there are multiple ways to drop columns. So now that we have the number of graduates from Ontario as a percentage of total Canadian graduates, we've been asked to drop the Canadian graduates column. So we'll use one of these two methods. Number one, we'll provide a list of column names to drop, or we can provide a list of column indexes that we want to drop. So let's take a look at method one. We can drop columns by name. So we can create a list of columns that we want to drop, and then we pass in the column names to the drop function on our data frame via the columns parameter. Let's give this a try. We'll come back into Spider, and we'll say gradsb equals gradsb.drop columns equals, and now I need to create a list of columns. I'm going to create a list of columns called columns to drop. I'll set this equal to square bracket, and in my square bracket in quotes, Canada. Then I come down here into my drop function and say columns that I want to drop is equal to the list of columns to drop. And if I run this code and take a look at gradsb, I now have three columns: year, Ontario, and percent Ontario. So that's one method of dropping columns. Drop them by name. Now, what if your column names are very long? These columns are short, but long column names could get tedious to type, and it's prone to error too. So we could get column names from our data frame directly. However, we can also retrieve column names from our data frame directly. So we can do this via the columns property, and then we can do some list slicing. So remember from week 3, we were slicing strings using our square brackets. Well, turns out we can do the same thing using lists. Well, why do we use this method? Well, it makes sure that we get the correct column names every single time. So let's try this. So I'm going to say columns to drop equals. So instead of providing this list manually, I'm going to say columns to drop equals gradsb.columns. So I specify my first column that I want to drop here. So it's columns to drop 1. And then I say gradsb equals gradsb.drop columns equals columns to drop. And now I've got gradsb, year, Ontario, and percent Ontario. Now, what if I want to drop multiple columns based on these indexes? Well, I can also do this. I can create a list and say I want to drop column at index 1. So I'll do columns to drop at index 1. And I'll say columns to drop at index 2. And if I run this code, now I've dropped Canada and Ontario, and I've just got year and percent Ontario. So if I put the column names at the given indexes in square brackets, I can drop based on column index. But in this case, I just want to drop the column at index 1. And there we go. We have year, Ontario, and percent Ontario. So now we've removed the number of Canadian undergraduates column. We have one challenge left, which is to export our cleaned data file to a new file. And remember, we can save data frames as CSV or Excel files. Now, we don't want to overwrite the original file. We want to create a new cleaned file, right? So we're going to save our data frame to a CSV file in this case by using the to_CSV function. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to say gradsb.toCSV grads cleaned.csv. And if we look at our files, we have grads cleaned, year, Ontario, and percent Ontario, but we've got this extra column. And that's technically our index column, but we don't need that in our output. So in this case, I'm going to say index equals false. And that will omit that extra column in our grads cleaned file. So now we have year Ontario, percent Ontario. Cleaned, ready for import by our coworkers. So what we've done so far is subset our data, created a computed column, renamed column names, dropped unnecessary columns, and exported our clean data to a new file.